prior to 2017, I was a very cool person. I was a very shy girl, actually, not cool. So prior to 2017, I was a very shy girl. And I say shy, but to my friends, family, and people who know me, I came across as being very unfazed with life. I was cool, calm, and collected. And this wasn't because I was particularly cool at anything. It was because I didn't react to what life threw at me with anything more than an ounce of emotion. So for example, when I was 12, I remember I was in my room, I don't know what I was doing, but my mom walks in the middle of the day, and she tells me that her and my dad, after 12 years of domestic instability, they were going to get a divorce, and that my dad wouldn't be living with us for the rest of my life. And I remember looking up from whatever I was doing, and I looked her in the face and I went, okay. And I went about my day. So fast forward to 4 years later when I was 16, and this boy that I really liked, he was in love with someone else, and he told me that he didn't see me in that way. And at that moment, at that very moment, I realized that he had used me to get to another friend, and in my extreme heartbreak and disappointment and rage, I blocked him on MSN, and I didn't talk to him forever, as we all do. So yeah, it wasn't just about being shamefully silenced, right? I also grew up in a household where a lot of emotions weren't allowed to be felt. So emotions like anger, hate, disappointment, irritation, I wasn't allowed to feel any of those emotions. And I had developed what my therapist would later term as an anger iceberg. So what is an anger iceberg? An anger iceberg is basically, after all these years of suppressing all my emotions, I had lost all nuance and what it means like to be human. And essentially what had happened was that I had developed this huge, unsurmountable amount of anger. And I didn't just have an anger iceberg, right? I had a sadness iceberg, and I had a hopelessness iceberg. And I couldn't feel anything more than large amounts of anger, sadness, or hopelessness at any given amount of time. So to my therapist, it was perfectly fine for someone like me to lose my mind. And I only found solace in writing. Right? I wrote a lot. I wrote so much. I filled all these books with things that I wanted to say, but I still wasn't reacting to things in real time. And this was because of the idea that I wasn't allowed to air my dirty laundry. I wasn't allowed to talk about things that I wanted to talk about that were a little bit more sensitive, like my parents' divorce, or the fact that I had to check myself into the Institute of Mental Health 2 years ago for clinical depression. I wasn't allowed to talk about any of that. And because of this anger iceberg, and because of all my suppressed emotions, and I didn't have an emotional outlet, this led me to look for something else to be heard. And this is where art comes in. And this is how art has given me a voice. So in 2017, I made my musical debut. And I remember stepping onto the darkened stage. In my intense fear and anxiety, it was just me and my guitar and my microphone. And I was super scared. In that fear, I saw something else. In this darkened crowd, I saw a blank canvas. I saw a canvas in the form of patient listening ears. And when I sang a song, it was like watching a splash of paint hit this canvas. And the more I spoke and the more I sang, I realized that I could color in my world in any way that I wanted to. So after the show, people from the audience, complete strangers, started sending me messages on social media saying how much they could relate to what I was saying on stage. And this blew my mind because I did not talk about anything that was particularly pleasant. Right? I spoke about bullies who called me ugly. I talked about my loved ones calling me ugly, and I talked about all the times that I had my heart broken. So it changed me. This performance changed me, right? Because I realized that I had found a way to finally be heard, and I had found a way to connect to the real world. So it was a pretty good show. And I left the show with this big lesson learned, that the power of the microphone, literal or metaphorical, gives anyone with a story a voice. And some people use this power to communicate the outrageous, And some people use this power for good. Some people use this power to communicate good ideas and to shift society in a direction that they would hope to see. And this idea of art, there is a reason why we always subconsciously assign artists the responsibilities of being a role model. And that's because the medium of artistic expression is very often one way. Art is not received, it is experienced. You only see what an artist wants you to see. It is the truest form of self-expression, and its effects are often very cathartic. So let's look at art, right? So this is Vincent van Gogh's self-portrait of a bandaged ear. You only see what Van Gogh wants you to see, which is obviously his bandaged ear, his smoking pipe, his obvious choice of winter clothing set against a warm-toned background. My question to you is, what do you feel when you look at this painting? And I know a large amount of people feel completely indifferent, right? It's just a dude with a paintbrush and a mirror, I guess, to facilitate this process. But to some people, the contrast of that warm-toned background with his contextualized cold could communicate a feeling of desperation for warmth, loneliness. But here's the thing, there is never a correct answer. And that's something very important to take with you whenever you engage with any piece of art. So, ever since I released my book of poems, and I released my EP, which is basically an album with 5 songs, question I get asked frequently is, where do you get your inspiration to write your songs? How do you write your poems, right? Where does all of this inspiration come from? The answer is that there is never a correct answer, as all things are. Every artist works differently. And because of the way that I was raised, and because of the things that I've been through in life, my style of writing is inherently very confessional. I write about the ugly things in life. I talk about things like wanting to kill myself in the middle of the night during a depressive episode. I write about falling in love with boys who have girlfriends. And I also write about wanting to change my body to get back at my bullies. But most recently, I guess, I wrote a song about being adopted. And it's something that is a big part of who I am. But no one really wants to talk about it at home. It's weird because when people don't want to talk about this part of you, it gets slightly awkward and confusing. And even if I wanted to talk about it, people just kept telling me stuff like, yo man, you shouldn't be feeling sad, right? You should be feeling this large amounts of appreciation and gratefulness for your family for giving you this new lease at life. And I get it, I completely get it, but no one really wanted to listen to me talk about that stark difference between feeling like the unwanted child and at the same time feeling like the luckiest girl alive. So I did what I do best. I wrote a song about it, and after I wrote it, without anyone's permission, I suddenly had the chance to talk about it. So this is a song I wrote, and I'm going to tell you what it's like to be adopted. This is Baby Shoes. I was born a broken little toy that no one wanted to keep. 2 left feet and buttons as eyes, alone for so long, so alone. Sold me off to a discount mall. I sat on a shelf till you came along. 'Cause if you don't want me, then no one else would. Fall in love with a stranger, no one else should. But you cry all night, no, what did you like? When these baby shoes can tell that I was for sale, but loved so well. picked me up from the checkout aisle. Ran out of change, got me for a $5. Took me home and told me you loved me. Changed my name, said you got lucky. Take the receipt and break my heart. If something in me is faulty, won't you take me apart? 'Cause if you don't want me, then no one else would. Fall in love with a stranger, no one else should. But you cry all night, oh, what did you like? When these baby shoes can tell that I was for sale, but loved so well. Thank you. Thank you. I am not afraid to write the ugly. I talk about my secrets, I sing about all these feelings, and I'm not afraid to air out my dirty laundry. And in doing this, I'm able to tap on complex, often unspoken topics that we don't really talk about in day-to-day conversations. I'd like to emphasize that writing a poem or writing a song has never closed any of my wounds. In fact, writing a poem or writing a song is hardly the solution to any problem, because life just doesn't work that way. What it has done is that it has given me a voice, and in turn, I use that voice to speak the unspoken. Thank you for listening to my TED Talk, and have a nice day.